idea of being inside or outside. So colorism is hardly a new concept. In fact, it can be traced back to the 17th and 18th centuries. And during slavery, skin tone played a large role in the type of work one did. Those who had darker skin tones were often put to work outside in fields which included laborious tasks, such as in tough working conditions. And then oftentimes people who had a lighter skin tone were often a product of a rape between slave owner and slave. And those who had this particular tone would be assigned to domestic tasks within the house. So I do want to preface by saying that I have been learning more about slavery in general over the break. I read a book by Angela Davis called Woman, Race, and Class. And it was a really, really good book. It's really interesting. I would recommend it if any of you have the chance of uh, taking some time to read. I know that classes are a lot right now, so maybe not at this moment, but later on. It's a really, really good book. But I think I learned a lot more about slavery off of the lens of what we're taught throughout school. For me, I remember learning about slavery, and it was kind of just like, here is the very basics, and then we're not going to cover anything past that. So it was really interesting to learn more about how women, especially dark-skinned women and women in general, really were seen as commodities, and you're really only seen as someone that's going to work and do the job, and that's it. And a lot of the times, I think that when we think of women in slavery, we tend to think that they're inside the house and taking care of the kids and kind of having these domesticated tasks, which wasn't always the truth. And more times than not, they were in the fields working and doing tasks that men were doing. And it was really less about gender and more about being property. So that was really interesting to find out and learn. But more often than not, people that were inside of the house or lighter skin tone still had to do and face just unimaginable horrors and tasks. So even though they were inside of the house and they had access to different things that people that worked in the fields didn't have access to, they were still put through just horrible conditions. And it's important to remember that, even though it might seem that if you're inside the house, you have more privileges than being outside. So it was an entirely different life in a sense, because many of those who were in the house had closer interactions with slave owners. And so that meant sometimes they had access to some clothes and better food and sometimes education. But it was really, really a stretch on whether or not you had access to these things. And more oftentimes than not, you kind of just were inside of the house doing the task because you were seen as lighter, and then therefore you had more proximity to whiteness. So if the slave owners could see somewhat of themselves in you, it was almost like you were human. So you were closer to them than people that were, say, outside on the fields, and therefore sometimes they might have given you access to things that people working outside didn't have access to. So we're moving from the 18th and 19th century to the 20th century, to the brown paper bag test. Does anyone have any idea of what the brown paper bag test encompassed or what it was?
To get into places, you had to have that skin tone or lighter, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So the brown paper bag test was a way of either accepting or denying one access to jobs, clubs, and schools based on their skin tone. And those who were lighter than the brown paper bag were accepted, while those who were darker were denied based solely on their ability to pass. And this had me thinking a lot about like private institutions and things like tennis clubs and like golf clubs and things of that sort. Because when you gain access to these things, you're kind of put into this box that you have access to money, and you're able to make connections and kind of build your wealth. And that's something that's a big conversation in the African American community today, which is kind of learning about generational wealth and what are some of the things that stop people from being able to build wealth. And so when we think back to the 20th century and the brown paper bag test, you can really see that people that were a darker skin tone didn't have access to have these conversations or certain jobs or go to school. So it really all affected everything was kind of in communication. If you can't get into a job, then you can't build your wealth. If you can't get into a school, then you can't learn. You can't uh, do whatever you want to do with certain knowledges. So it's really crazy how a lot of these things that were put in based solely around racism and around skin tone still play a role today and affect large amounts of communities and their struggles right now. So colonialism as a whole, like I said, I did kind of focus on African Americans and the plight of slavery, but it's important to know that colonialism is a very big fact. In fact, it's where everything started in context to skin tone. So Great Britain colonized all but 22 countries. So you can see in this map that there's very, very few places that weren't colonized. And even though they weren't colonized, so to say, it's you can pretty much guess that everywhere around was since everywhere around was colonized, that these people did take on a lot of the learnings that Great Britain uh, kind of forced onto the different cultures that were colonized. So we've also seen assimilation tactics used to conform many cultures into fit into what the majority wants. Again, it's basically about proximity to whiteness. How close can we get all of these cultures to think and act in the way that, in this case, Great Britain wanted them to think and act? And then I also included some different forms of colonialism throughout time. We have the British invasion of Rio de la Plata, um, Japanese internment camps, and then the Haitian Revolution, and also indigenous people as well. We all kind of learned about the Trail of Tears and just the plight that all of these different communities and different cultures faced because of colonialism and because uh, people want to spread certain religions or certain ideals to other people. So it affects so many different cultures and so many different communities. So it's important to note that through slavery and colonialism, the gold standard of whiteness and Eurocentric beliefs is solidified. Those who relinquished their own cultures and internalized colonial beliefs fared better. And we see that a lot with the indigenous people now, because a lot of times when you think back, it's like you either accept the fact that you are going to die or face just complete terror, or you're going to assimilate into a culture that wants you to act a certain way or be a certain way. And it's honestly a survival tactic at that point. It's like, I want a better life for my kids. I want a better life for my family. So you're going to do things that you may not want to do or give up parts of yourself that you don't want to give up in order to just survive. So we're going to swing into modern day, and we have a few different images that stood out to me. Media plays a huge role in colorism. We can see Beyonce and then Gabby as well are lightened on these covers of magazines. And also, this is an Indian actress who lightened her skin, most likely using one of these products, which is Fair and Lovely. And we'll discuss that in a little bit as well. And I also included a book by Lupita Nyong'o called Soulway, which is a book based on her story and her struggle growing up. So basically, if you don't know, Lupita Nyong'o is an actress, and she is dark skinned, on the darker scale of dark skin, and she has been kind of like tormented by the media and denied jobs based on her dark skin until she wrote this children's book, and it's all about Solway, who is a young girl, and she kind of is trying to find a way to get rid of her dark skin, and this includes like praying it away and wishing it away and just kind of having this like idea that I want to do everything that I can to get rid of my dark skin. And I thought it was really, really interesting that she wrote a book, especially towards young children, because that's when kids are learning and their brains are being molded. So I thought it was a really good idea that she made it into a children's book and is talking about it so much and kind of speaking out about her story. And then also, I'm not sure if everyone knows this movie, but it was at first a book, and it's called The Hate You Give, and it's basically kind of about African American plight during modern day, and kind of like the um, different communications between police and African Americans. And at first, the book is shown to be like this dark skinned black girl, and she has like afro hair, and it's very big, and she's obviously dark skinned. But when the movie is done, we have Amandla, who is a non-binary person, and she's light skinned, but they also get casted in a lot of movies where the original character is supposed to be dark skinned. So there's this conversation about why we're always switching out these characters to be lighter than what they're based on. And then a couple of days ago, there was an Oprah interview with Meghan and Prince Harry, and they discussed the the color of their baby, and it was a huge discussion in the royal like grouping that they were scared that their baby would be darker, a dark complexion, which is really interesting because Megan is uh, half black and half white, and then obviously Prince Harry is all white. So it was really interesting that there's this fear of anti-blackness going around in such royal spaces where you would think that it's 2021 and people have grown, but obviously a lot of it is still you're still scared of being and you're still scared of being a darker skin tone. There's still this fear of blackness. So the first community that we're going to talk about is the Latinx community. And
Map, I have met Latino.
sorry about that. We have a video called What Latinos Look Like, and it's by Carlos Andres Gomez. And he just talks about how the Latinx community is so diverse and there's so many different skin tones, and what it all means to him.
Map, I have met Latinos who people think are Aboriginal in Patagonia, East Asian in Chile, West African in La República Dominicana, Scandinavian, Argentina, Native American in Colombia. I met Latinos who look like Juan Valdez and can't speak a word of Spanish. Others who look like Hillary Duff with a mother who looks like Hillary Clinton that are from Paraguay and teach Spanish grammar in Puerto Rico. Latinos who speak Quechua and nothing else, dance cumbia like the horizon is on fire because of them, and now they're trying to burn tomorrow to the ground. I have met Latinos who cook like their broken English moms and mispronounce their own last names. Colombians who don't know who Gabriel Garcia Marquez was. Dark-skinned Dominicans who hate Haitians because they remind them that they're African. Blue-eyed Cubans who spit poetry about revolution and mean it.
So that was only a clip from his poem, and it's a really good video. I would recommend checking it out if you have the time. It's only a couple minutes, but I had to condense it into a shorter clip. But it was really interesting to hear how diverse the Latinx community is and how many different people experience different things in different skin tones. So I included some research done by Dr. Fuentes, who is our advisor, and actually Melanie and Kai, who are both on our e-board, our president and our secretary. They did some work in this research. And so it was really interesting. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie and Kai, if you want to jump in at any point, but they kind of broke it up into two sections. And so one was kind of gathering research that took kind of like based on they used a scale that discussed skin tones and how people collected information and research on how people related their skin tones to the scale. And then they also did, I believe they took photographs of people's hands and did some kind of collecting research on how the person felt about their skin and then how it lined up to these different scales. And so there's some research that I pulled and put on the slide. one study that they found was done between skin tone and the psychological adjustment for Latinx Blacks and non-Latinx Blacks. And the results show that Latinx Blacks reported lighter skin tones, less satisfaction with their skin tones, lower racial centrality, and than non-Latinx Blacks. Um, Skin tone satisfaction was negatively associated with anxiety, depression, and positively associated with positive effects. So this was really interesting because we can kind of see what Carlos was talking about, how there's so many different people within this community and they all have different skin tones. But within that, so many people feel negatively about their skin tone and face different adversities such as like anxiety, depression, and then also not being able to relate to their entire community. So you have such a vast community, but within that, people don't feel like they can connect to everyone just based off of their skin tone alone. And so that was really interesting because I think when you're a part of such great communities and you get to meet so many people and discover so many different types of music and food, and you feel based on your skin tone that you cannot relate to these other people, it's honestly, it's no wonder that there's it's also associated with anxiety and depression, because you can kind of feel how that would really affect somebody. Another article that was mentioned in this research explored the relationship between skin color and academic achievement. And they used boys of Mexican origin and Dominican origin. And they found that based on skin color, boys who perceive themselves as darker skinned revealed a negative association between being Black and academic achievement. So not is it only hurting people socially and within their own culture, but it's also affecting people academically, and they don't feel that they're living up to their full potential, or they might be taking these plights that they're bringing in from the skin tone into their classrooms. So it's affecting people, and especially young children, on so many different levels.
Can I jump in here?
Yes.
With the research that we did, that Melly and I helped with in Dr. Fuentes' lab, excuse the background noise, the two parts of it were that skin color just is not really talked about in research, in psychological research, which is part of the reason why Dr. Fuentes was interested enough to not only sort of look into how is skin color being measured, which was basically the entire paper, but I think he even is like looking into creating his own sort of rating scale to create a sort of, okay, if you're a number one, then universally you are considered this sort of skin tone versus a 7, which is this skin tone. And this is sort of like a pseudo plug for just doing research in general, because only, I think it was like 2.5% of all research on like actual skin color actually talks about colorism. And that's even if these academic research even mention skin color. So adding yourself to this research field is definitely worthwhile, because who else is going to be talking about these sort of stuff? Who knows what we could find if we actually spent time looking into things.
Right. Just to add a little bit more to that, yeah. So like Kai said, we only found like 2% of, after going through over 100 different articles, we all looked into it and we finally hardly found anything that looks at different, just on the spectrum of skin tone, even within the same community. It doesn't, a lot of people don't look at that and don't consider, like in psychological research, the dissonance that might be happening because of those differences in skin tone. And what, like Kai said, it was broken into two. First, looking at how many journals actually looked at these differences, and then the other portion of our research focused on gathering information from participants about how colorism affects their acculturation process in the United States. For those who are first or second generation, how does that affect how easily you I guess, find a sense of community within the United States. And that was definitely something interesting to look at. And I think I'm learning a little bit more about that right now, because I'm taking a Hispanic and Latino psychology course right now. And it's just, yeah, a lot of this research needs to continue going on, because mentally it's just a very ostracized place to be in, when even within your community you don't feel like you belong because you don't necessarily look like other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's a really great point. If when I was doing the research for this as well, a lot of it was based on African Americans in our community, but it was there wasn't a lot of research diving in globally. So if you know yourself that your culture experiences some forms of colorism, it might be really interesting to look more into and see if you can even take it into your graduate research if you're planning on going to grad school, because it's a really, really interesting topic, and I only have like the very basics and like the top of what colorism is. So if you want to know more about it, I would suggest checking it out. So just through the past couple of slides, we talked about fear of dark skin, cultural alignment, academic achievement, psychological distress, and all of it is kind of based off of anti-Blackness. So this is a...
Sorry to interrupt, Kiara. Larry
Yeah.
raised his hand.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry, I can't see you.
That's okay. If I may as well jump in, along with the skin tone, also in the Latinx community, your proficiency on Spanish also plays a huge part in how they accept you. My Spanish is straight up trash. And I joke around with my mom, like, hey, if I go visit Mexico, like, are they gonna know I'm American? And like, obviously they will, because my Spanish is so bad. And my mom jokes around, she's like, yeah, you know, you're kind of raised white. But the more I think about it, yeah, if I go to Mexico, I'm not gonna be very used to the way they do things over there as opposed to over here. And also not speaking Spanish is like a huge insult to like the Latinx community. And so a lot of them would be offended, and they will probably think that I think I'm better than them just because I have papers and I'm American.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
Okay, so what Larry was saying, I want to add to that, especially not in not speaking Spanish. I watched the movie actually last year for one of my classes, and it was like called Volcano. It was talking about how indigenous groups, even with indigenous languages, are discriminated against because they don't speak the Spanish. They don't speak, I guess, the national language. So it's a very interesting from us, because I'm Dominican, that my Spanish is also terrible. Don't even you're fine, I got you. And it's like, obviously they're gonna know that I'm American because my accent is completely off, but it's just like crazy how, yes, exactly, we were in the same class, I think, Melanie. But yeah, so it's
I remember you.
okay, lit. But yeah, it's so crazy how even if it's just our accent that is off, the way that we speak, but it's also something that's completely happening in that country that have indigenous people, how they're discriminated against just because they don't know that main language.
No, that's so true.
That definitely ties into colorism, because a lot of that has to do, specifically in the movie that Mary Ellis was referring to, has to do a lot with distancing themselves from indigenous culture, which includes, you know, obviously different languages and darker skin tones. Definitely has to do a lot with distancing yourself from indigenous culture and adapting to colonialism and the Spanish language that was brought over from Europe ages ago. So yeah, that definitely connects, especially, yeah, the way that Larry's saying. It's just interesting how it goes even beyond. You kind of can't win, because some people in Latin America will distance themselves from indigenous culture, but then if you come in from America, you want to adhere more to your Latinx culture, so you gotta kind of find the in between there. But yeah, it all feeds into each other, honestly. And I guess the further step would be not only distancing yourself from indigenous culture, but distancing yourself from Latin American culture altogether. If you're in the States, a lot of parents don't speak Spanish as much with their children as they do English, because they don't want their kids, they want their kids to acculturate more to American culture. So again, it's just kind of distancing yourself from your roots, and colorism definitely plays a lot into that.
That's a great point. And actually, this is a perfect segue into our video, this next video, and it kind of talks about finding a balance.
La raza promote white supremacy, and how do we move beyond this to Black affirmation?
There's a painting called The Redemption of Ham. It's about a Brazilian family, right? And you see a dark-skinned Black grandmother with her hands raised to the sky, as if she's thanking God. You see her daughter, right, who is lighter skinned. She's still visibly Black, but she's lighter skinned. You see the daughter's partner, who is a white man, and you see the child, who is white. And this demonstrates the aspirational movement, generation by generation, towards whiteness.
These ideologies like blancamiento and mestizaje are very much colonial, they're very Latin American rooted.
Blanqueamiento and mejorar la raza are aspirational ideas that manifest in dating practices, right, and who you choose to partner with, but at their core are white supremacist ideas.
I'm still in the process of forgiveness because they just didn't know better, and to them that was like a ticket out. It was a ticket out where, like, somewhere, somehow, having a lighter skinned grandchild was somehow gonna not only get them out of the situation they were in, but it was also like, I don't want you to endure what I had to endure. They didn't have the language, right? They didn't have the privilege to unpack all of the hate that was brought up upon them. And that's why it's our duty. That's why Griselda and I go so hard, because we don't have an excuse. You know, a lot of my work is in phenomenology, which is this idea that our oppression and domination happens in the mind more than in anything else. So if you get people to think like a white person, I'm gonna be very like simple in my explanation, then you've controlled them because you've disassociated them from their true self. So this idea that to be successful, you have to not only look white, but then think white and engage the world in a very European way, which is very individualistic, very like competitive, self-made. I think that's one way in which we're indoctrinated and we're kept oppressed.
I think they brought up amazing points, especially about privilege. I've been thinking about that too, like how much of it is as a privilege to be able to like sit in these spaces and gather research and learn about why all of these things have happened. And it's honestly amazing that we've come so far and that all of us are able to have these different opportunities, because back then it was about survival. Like if a lighter skin is going to grant my future child or grandchild the ability to find a job faster or be able to make more, communicate with other people, like that's something that I'm going to do. It's survival. And you kind of think of it as a way of like evolutionary psychology. Like what do we want? We all want to be able to survive at the end of the day. And so even though looking back, a lot of these things are harmful and we're trying to unlearn them now, it's you do have to provide that space to be like, well, it was survival back then. So now we're going to move on to Asian and African communities and talk a little bit about skin bleaching. So this idea of anti-Blackness is ever present in South Asia and Africa. Regardless of the health risks, the skin bleaching market thrives within these communities. I did have a like smaller picture earlier on, but these are some of the products that are sold within like beauty salons and just like anywhere that you can honestly gain access to them, they're going to sell them to you. So these ones are marketed to men, and it's oftentimes called like a fairness cream. And that's, or this one over here is called like a Snow White cream. So they're promoting getting lighter at the end of the day. It's like, regardless of what this product is going to do to your skin, you could achieve being lighter or being closer to being white. So the World Health Organization reported that half of the population in Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines uses some kind of skin lightening treatment, and it's even higher in India, which is about 60%, and in African countries such as Nigeria, which is 77%. And that was crazy to me because like half and like even more than half, it's just the amount of people that are seeking out these products and truly just want to have lighter skin is honestly like mind-blowing. And so by 2027, the skin whitening industry is projected to be worth over $24 billion. Again, it's crazy what capitalism will do. Anything that they can sell you based on the horrific different concepts that people have had to endure over the years and throughout history, if they can make a quick buck off of it and sell it to you and package up these ideas, they're going to do it. So it's just crazy to me because $24 billion is just like, I can't even imagine the amount of money. And then on top of that, a lot of the everyday products that we use, like Nivea, that might be US based, they make a killing with these products overseas. And this is a quote from Claire Chang, who's a doctor, and she said it's a business fraud with potential hazards. So people know that they're kind of getting into the fact that it could be life threatening, but to the ability to achieve lighter skin at the end of the day is worth the risk. So I have this little clip, and it's from Vice News, and it's called "Why India's Fair Business is Booming," and it's just a little bit about the industry and why people might seek out lightening their skin.
Men to go to extreme lengths to become lighter.
Is that smell her skin burning?
No, this is the carbon.
The carbon.
Which is burning. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm hitting all these carbon particles with the laser. So what it does, it will go and hit the melanin. When the melanin is hit, it will get destroyed. Then the patient will feel a sense of glowing and a brightness on the face.
So it basically destroys that
Destroys this pigment temporarily.
How popular has this treatment been?
From last year, there's a 100% increase in the number of people who are coming in for this treatment.
Wow, you've seen 100% growth in this part of your business.
Yes, in this part of the business.
And Neha, how did you decide to get this treatment?
मुझे जॉब के लिए जाना था, तो उसके लिए मेरे को इंटरव्यू के लिए गई थी, तो वहाँ पर उन लोगों ने वो पूरा मेरा डॉक्यूमेंट सब कुछ अच्छे थे, बट बिकॉज ऑफ लुक उन लोगों ने मुझे रिजेक्ट कर दिया कि फेयरनेस होगा तो मेरे को कोई बेटर अच्छा जॉब मिलेगा.
You know, if you're applying to a job, will an employer say, I'm sorry, you're too dark?
कितने जॉब्स में ऐसा बोला है कि आपके लुक वाइज अच्छे नहीं है तो हम आपको जॉब नहीं दे सकते, क्योंकि रिसेप्शनिस्ट पहले एंटर करते ही रिसेप्शनिस्ट होते हैं, तो रिसेप्शनिस्ट उन लोगों को गुड चाहिए होती है.
So that was a really hard clip. I think the original Vice video is like maybe like 20 minutes long. It's really, really good if you want to check it out. And it's honestly devastating how she mentions not being able to find a job, because then we think back to the brown paper bag test and this idea of being inside or outside. It's like all of these things still affect us today. And this Vice, I think they filmed it like a couple of years ago, but the fact that the market is going to boom till 2027 and be worth like over $24 billion is crazy, because it's obviously an industry that's not going anywhere. And if we don't kind of dissect why these things are happening, they're going to keep making money and keep playing on people's insecurities surrounding skin tone.
Completely. Just to cut in, because I know since you're presenting, you can't see the chat or like who's raising their hand.
Okay.
So I'm gonna read from the chat real quick. And then Mariellis has her hand up, so I'll let her speak right after. So in the chat, we have some people saying, I remember constantly wondering as a kid what life would be like if I were white. It's insane how colonialism makes us dislike our roots and culture. Priyanka says, I was lucky my mom did not force me to use fair and lovely, but not many others were so lucky. It's really sad that colorism is so ingrained in our society. Larry agreeing, as a Mexican, he sees that yeah, we come in all different skin tones in the Latinx community. Kai said, I think I could extend to speaking the same language in the Black community. Speaking white is, whatever that means, is looked down on by part of the community. Priyanka says, I can relate with the language thing. In India, speaking English means you are educated and it has ties to colorism. If you speak only Hindu or other languages, then you are looked down upon. This is all hitting Kai, home for Kai a little bit. He's dated people who said, I can't bring you around my parents because they hate you since you're Black. That is ridiculous. That's very harsh. That's a horrible thing to say. Agreed. Everyone calling Kai beautiful. I agree. Cecilia says, in Hungary, you have to learn English from age 7, then in high school, one more language. They also look down on you if you don't know at least English. And I think that's all from the chat. So I'll let Mariellis take over.
Hi. Okay, so as you said, like, or the girl in the video said, like, she can't get a job because her skin tone is too dark, which is insane because, you know, she's light skinned. But, you know, different cultures have different meanings of what is light skin, I guess. And it just brought me back to the class that I'm learning right now. I'm in the Black woman class. And we are just going through like American history, but, you know, in the eye of actual Black culture. And it's insane how it just reminded me how she got rejected from a job because of her skin color. But thinking of back before schools were able to be integrated, how schools, universities have rejected Black people on the base of the skin color, just that. But it's also not because you're light skin or dark skin, it's just because you're Black. You're not able to get an education. So it's like crazy how everything is tied in together. Like, if you can't get educated, how you're supposed to get a good job? If it's like, it's just everything is so integrated, and education as well, because, you know, how we talked about in the last week, how education is so important for people to rise above, you know, of the basic or the common standard of thinking. And it's just like, it's just so frustrating. So frustrating.
No, I completely agree. Like, all of you guys raised really good points. It's honestly sad that it's gotten this far, but it's also like, when we don't have these conversations, what can you really expect? But hopefully, as we learn, things will change, because obviously everyone's making money off of us. Everyone's kind of feeling anxiety or depression because of these things. So it's important that we keep having these conversations. So why would one lighten their skin? One study on Indian arranged marriages found that darker skin marriage candidates were rated lower in preference by prospective mothers-in-laws compared to their light-skinned counterparts. And this was a quote from the same article. The payoff comes in forms of job security, progress, and power. Skin bleaching in Africa is therefore a business-oriented decision. So the appearance of being lighter skinned means faster and easier access to landing higher paying jobs, particularly in sales and marketing. So once again, we kind of have this idea of it being survival. If I can lighten my skin and make so much more money, why would I not do that? Even if it means I have to change some part of my appearance or change a part of myself, if it's going to better off my family and myself even, then I'm going to do it, because it's about survival. So now we're going to the African American community.
So scroll all the way down.
Sorry for the clip playing. This is from a TED Talk, Chika Okoro, and I'm not sure if anyone wants to cut in and kind of like explain what they know. When Straight Outta Compton came out, the movie, I think it might have been like 3 to 4 years ago. I have no concept of time anymore, honestly. But there was a casting list that was, I don't know if it was leaked or it was just like put online, and they were accepting a lot of people because it was such a big franchise and such a big movie. But it basically separated people into lists. So there was an A list, a B list, a C list, and then a D list. And so at the top of the A list, it was light skin, your hair had to be yours, meaning you had to have no extensions. I think they even mentioned like the texture of your hair. And then as you went down the list, you kind of just got like darker and darker, and they started accepting things like extensions. And then at the D list, the very last people, they were calling for dark skinned women that were like out of shape and kind of just played into this stereotypical like loud, angry, like dark skinned black, like just an horrible way to describe anyone. You shouldn't be listing anything when it comes to humans in such a way. But Chika Okoro talks a little bit about what she thought of it and kind of about the entire situation.
So I scroll all the way down to the last category, the D girls. The casting call reads, these are African American girls, poor, not in good shape, must have a darker skin tone. Darker skin tone. Well, I guess that's me, a D girl. When I first read this, I felt betrayed. Any given year, there are just a handful of movies starring Black actors and actresses. Just a handful of...
Ooh. Sorry for the clip. Not my Wi-Fi acting up like this. So embarrassing. Let's try it again.
Just a handful.
Oh. I'm not sure if it's going.
The actresses that look like me on the big screen, and so they were fierce and beautiful and desirable. So I felt betrayed when even in these small circles where I'm allowed to feel beautiful, I'm so shoved aside for those with more favorable features. Light skin, light eyes, long, soft, real hair. But the more I thought about it, the more the feeling of betrayal slipped away to a more familiar feeling of, that's just the way it is.
So that was really interesting because it kind of plays into, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but just the media in general, and that how we frame women and men based on their skin tone and allow people that are lighter skin tone or have certain attributes be in the limelight instead of people that are darker. And it was really interesting how they mentioned like being poor and like size, and it was just like, how disgusting do you have to be to release something like this and be 100% serious as a franchise? So do these rankings manifest in everyday society? And the quick answer is yes. As we kind of discussed, lighter skinned Black people are generally more advantaged educationally and economically, and are more likely to experience status advancements than people with more pigmentation. Dark skinned Black people are more likely to be convicted and receive death penalties than lighter skinned ones. So it's playing into society academically, socially, economically, and then also in our justice system. And then also within beauty standards. So ideology surrounding colorism suggests that Blacks are perceived as being more attractive when the phenotype features, example, your nose, your lip shape, hair texture, are closely analogous, or I'm sorry if I said that word wrong, to the whites than their African ancestors. So again, we're kind of seeing colonialism in play. Once again, you have to have features that are closer to whiteness, closer to what is normal in terms of like European standards, and that plays into how we see beauty today. It's clear that skin tone has played a major role in how one is viewed. These instilled ideals are detrimental socially, economically, and then of course politically. This is a clip from Oprah. She did a special on it was called Dark Girls, and it kind of just took you along to what different women or different young girls in schools kind of faced, and what their everyday life was like when they're darker skinned or based on their skin tone. And so it kind of stemming the question, what do these societal views and encompass, and how do they impact us psychologically?
I remember I would say ninth grade, I thought like, what if it just wasn't here? It'd just be easier. But like, The only thing that got me through that was like my mom telling me and my friends, especially Kamaya, just like being there and having someone to talk to. It just made me think like I can't leave them because it keeps me like coming to school every day and like just like the smile on my face sometimes.
It's painful.
It is. Because it shouldn't happen to anyone. We shouldn't have to hate ourselves because of the color of our skin. And the fact that I had to talk one of my best friends out of not wanting to be like that because the color of our skin, about the fact that we're just so bad. It's not right.
You have to love yourself and love the others around you and know that you're gonna be okay. And you have to stay strong.
So that was a really hard clip. It honestly takes me back to some of my experiences that I had when I was younger and going through high school and middle school. And you can really see how close this community is within these girls, because you kind of have to have that person to lean on. And the fact that some of these girls had thoughts of suicide and not wanting to go to school or just be alive because of the way that they're being perceived based on their skin tone, and the impact that it has to not only carry that to school every day, but also take it into your everyday life and kind of know it's something that you're going to have to deal with because of the way that society treats people of a darker skin tone. It was really upsetting and sad that we've come to a place where we can't even accept each other and learn from our past and know that we have to let go of some of these teachings that we've been taught.
Yeah, and that's not even to mention the microaggressions that people face from well-meaning people that probably aren't even racist at heart or anything negative at heart, but they just aren't educated enough to know that, hey, saying, oh, I don't want a dark-skinned baby is one of the biggest microaggressions that you can have, and perpetuates this white supremacist thing that has been persistent.
That's a really great point. I hear that a lot, like this idea of like wanting beautiful kids, or like I want cute black babies, or whatever that means, because I'm like, all kids are cute, like what? But it just really cuts deep into how bad and true colonialism runs in our entire framework of things. So this is kind of like an ending video to kind of kick off a little bit of discussion. I know we're kind of closing in, but it was by The Cut on YouTube, and trans women and non-binary people of color kind of discuss colorism and kind of what they want out of discussions surrounding colorism.
I want people to know about colorism.
I want people to know the weight that it carries, especially lighter skinned white people. It exists, and just because they don't experience it directly, it's still a very real thing.
While you want to ensure darkest skinned people are in full understanding of the normalcy of their appearance, you also need to be very careful with not tasking people who are lighter skinned to do that work. I don't need a light skinned person to convince me that I'm pretty.
How can we stop colorism?
I would like to see more unconditional love.
You have to see everybody and respect everybody, and understanding that we're all equal.
There's beauty in diversity. There's beauty in being who you are authentically.
If the world exuded that a whole lot more, we would rise and we would soar so far, because there's nothing like the power of unconditional love.
Really powerful stuff. The idea of just loving whoever's around you is really true to what I hope comes out of conversations surrounding colorism. So I just have like a couple questions questions. Well, we're actually out of time, but if you guys want to kind of leave your lasting thoughts about colorism and maybe some of the things that you've experienced or what you think could come out of conversations surrounding colorism in the chat on your way out, that would be great. And then also, as we end, I would like to tell you all that we have an event next week, a really big event surrounding microaggressions. So it kind of connects to what we learned about here today, but we're having two candidates for their PhD come in next week, Cassandra Kaye and Nerlin Menendez, and they just microinterventions event, and they're going to be discussing some of the research that they've done, and they just finished a whole entire book about it. So it should be really, really interesting. We're going to meet from 1:30 to 2:45, and we're also going to have a 15-minute little session where you can ask them about some of the grad school questions that you have. So I just want to thank you all for coming and listening to my presentation. I hope that you learned something, and I'm really glad to hear from all of you guys and hear your perspectives. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Kiara. That was such an amazing presentation. A round of applause, even if it's a virtual one, for Kiara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
It really was great. You did a good job.
Thank you. With that, I'll see you guys later. Thank you all so much for coming, and make sure to check us out on Instagram if you